because I I give so much info out. Sometimes it's hard to remember everything, and especially once I get going, I touch on all kinds of subjects. So anyway, my name's Audrey Logan. I'm a knowledge keeper here in Winnipeg, and I originate from Edmonton, Alberta. My family from Fort McMurray, and I come from a long line of knowledge keepers, though I didn't grow up with them because of the 60s scoop when I was 3. But when I met them again, I found out that, yeah, I come by it naturally. And so I've been food secure now. It's been over 20 years, actually. 2003 is when I started on my journey of food security. And I was laying in bed at 310 pounds and very sick and on disability. We get $3.95 a day for food, which I'm sorry, it's $4 a day now. And we got a 5-cent raise. And you can't afford healthy food that way. But anyway, I it was almost like my ancestors kicked me in the butt and said, "Hey, if they could do it up in the bush in Fort McMurray, then I can definitely do it here." I've grown elsewhere as well, and so I kicked myself in the tush and went out there and started to. I first started at a neighbor's yard. She had a Green Party sign on her fence, so I gave a knock and asked if I could use her front yard since it was quite in a bad shape. That if I could use it for my traditional method of growing, which is no digging, um, no removing of things from the soil. I always add to it, and mulch is your main thing to add, which is a healthy thing for your soil. Puts back the humus because the worms come up and eat the leaf material and bring it back down and makes it very, it conditions it within 1 or 2 seasons. I've taken soil that was hard as a rock. I couldn't get a pitchfork in it. And by that next spring, it was soft. And by the spring after that, it was like gold to me. So anyway, between the growing in the yard and then in 2003, at the end of it, they started building Spirit Park at 200 Yonge Street. And so I helped with planting the plants there, as well as getting the beds ready and such. And now to see that little 1-foot tree, pine tree I put in is now 20-footer. It's nice to be back there to get it back to what it used to look like. Because I was gone for a while and it kind of went downhill a little bit. It's a little hard to manage land when you don't have a land steward. So anyway, I started also foraging. This city has a lot of food, but when you don't know what is food, it can make it a challenge um, to see beyond the box, beyond the can. And but luckily, I know a lot of our natural foods that can be eaten. I'd go for a walk and I'd see cherries in one yard, plums in another, red currants, black currants, grapes, plus the ones we planted at Spirit Park, where we got Saskatoons and grapes and cherries and such there and such, as well as some plants that people throw away because they call them weeds, such as lamb's quarter, right delicious when you saute it like spinach, very nutritious, as well as many other plants. Lovage, we also call it bear root, but it tastes like celery. And it turns out it's used even over in Europe and great in soup. My stomach can't handle celery, but I can handle the lovage. I like to call it lovage because it makes you feel lovely, right? And it does feel lovely when you're able to gather locally, you know what you're eating, and it feels secure in that. So over the years of having this knowledge and sharing with whoever wants to come and learn, as well as I share with schools and others. And so sharing with children, sometimes it's a little hard to share the science of things, but if it's put into story form, it tends to be able to stay in the mind a little longer. And now I understand why our people didn't write things down, because there's just so much information. And one story leads into another, that leads to another. It's like a web. It's just filled with so many different aspects. For every plant, there's an insect and an animal and the human, of what to do with them and how to use them. So to me, it's like it would be impossible to write a book. I'm not going to kill trees to save to help people wanting to save trees. And so that's why using this medium of the modern technology has been a great bonus. My auntie, way back 40 years ago, she said, someday, use the old knowledge with the new technology, and we'll get over these things. Because back then, for her, they knew about diseases. It was very common. And so knowing that this time would come, that we would need to be able to become food secure again, as well as pandemic, help to kind of wake people up to the fact that can't always rely on the store, and farmers already have it hard. Monoculture has been destroying our soil and such, so a lot more young farmers are going back to um, regenerative farming, as some call it. Some call it dry farming, some call it permaculture. It's got a few different names, but it's still a method that was used actually around the world in places where they found what they call black soil. And it's a method there again, puts back to the land, and that way the soil doesn't degenerate. And today we have our moon. It's going to be our eclipse, and also a blood moon, and many know it as the worm moon. And why we know it as that is, I understand it because that's when the worm wakes up from its sleep underneath the ground. And it turns out science has found that, yeah, they do actually go really deep, usually about 8 feet below the frost line. And when they wake up, that's when they come up. And once they start coming up, they start coming up to eat the dead leaf material that you leave on the land. And so we have a little story on that. And this little story goes, at a time when, after the flood, and the turtle had gathered all the animals and insects and such, and the sky woman came and landed on the back of the turtle. Trees started to have their leaves. Before that, they were spores, but then they started to have leaves, and plants started to have flowers. And everyone was told, do not dig in the soil. We have to let it build. And so no one dug. And the leaves would fall off the trees, and in no time there was soil created. And the leaves again fell off, and then made more soil. Well, it just so happens that, one little guy, a little ferret, beautiful golden color, goes, I wonder what's making that soil. I know we were told not to dig, but I'm curious. So again, the more soil was created and more soil created, because I'm really curious. I know we were told not to, but I can't help it. I got to find out. And so his curiosity led him to start digging. Digging, digging, digging. Paws got all black. I can't figure it out. Well, after a while, Sky Woman noticed that there's an area where the soil was not coming back. Said, okay, everybody, who's been digging? Everyone said, no, it wasn't me. Wasn't me, said the rabbit. I'd learned to live above ground for a while. And all the others were, no. And so after a while, they noticed still soil was not growing back in that one area. And finally, Ferret says, it was me. He said, I've been trying to figure out what was making that soil, and yet everywhere I dug, the soil wouldn't come back. He said, and I don't know why. And so the Sky Woman told him, well, when you dig, you disturb that soil, and then the sun kind of bleaches it out. And it's the worm that's creating the soil when it eats the leaf material. It leaves its waste and it becomes soil. Because, well, I guess you could tell, right? She goes, yeah, I knew it was you. That's why his black-footed ferret still has his black feet. because he was the one that was digging in the soil. And so knowing that that's another way of sharing with children is that you may try and hide it, but eventually you'll be found out anyway. And it's always good to tell the truth. So by Ferret telling the truth, after that, he's still to this day has his black feet and lives in the ground, and is healthy with the soil though. And so the worm, when it came out to talk to the others, said, every once in a while you'll see us come. Not many times will people see us, but when we do, we come up and we do the worm dance. We dance with each other and we go into each other's hole. And in the many, many decades I've been growing, I've only seen it once in my entire life. And it was a beautiful moment. I was sitting outside with my granddaughter, and she was about 3 years old. And it was actually during the day, so I was really surprised to see them. But they came up and they did their little movements. And then they went around each other and then went back into the holes. And I was just floored. I was just, that was such an honor to see that happen. And so when you see worms in your soil, that tells you how healthy your soil is. I've been in soil where you lift a square foot, hardly any worm, if any, sometimes. But the more mulch I would put on the soil in the fall, and even during the season, the more worms I got. In one area in West Broadway, I did an area that was really hard, and it was cement all around, and there was only a foot of soil. But by the second year, I had night crawlers like this, and one kid, he thought it was a snake. He's like, that's a snake, that's not a worm. And I was like, no, no, this is night crawler. This is the one that makes holes in the soil, and it allows the water to come through and also creates soil for us. He says, so we are eat, yeah, what do you mean things are growing in bug poop? I said, wow, that's a reality, you know, that one's waste from animals and insects is what creates our soil, which helps our plant to grow. And so he kind of came to terms with that because he realized it wasn't a snake, it was actually a worm, and had never seen a worm that big before. So when I test soil, that's the first thing I look for is the worms. So your worm count is important because they are very, very important for the soil, not only in creating the holes for aeration, but they're again bringing nutrients to the soil. So if you don't want worms in your garden, you're not going to get very good produce. And because a lot of our root vegetables will pull out the nutrients, and to put it back in, you need that mulch, that leaf material. Sometimes I've used straw, I've used whatever was around, as long as those worms will come and eat it. Because every spring people say, what happened to all those leaves you put down? Because you put down almost a foot of leaves. Worms came and ate it. So how do they know where it is? Well, because it's insulating the soil during winter, it creates like a warm patch, and they can sense where that insulated soil is. And I've gone out in the middle of winter. In fact, that's how I met some young friends of mine, because there I was in the middle of winter with a pitchfork, and they're like, what are you doing? So I moved the soil, I moved the leaves, and the soil's not frozen. And I was able to lift out my beets and my carrots and my sunroots and parsnips. And as I'm digging roots and getting back to my roots in a different way. And they were amazed with that you could, that the ground wasn't frozen. I said, well, you only have a certain amount of time though. You got to put that leaf material back, then the snow back on top, and it creates an insulated layer there. And so I can harvest at any time in the winter when you've got that kind of structure, right? And there again, I've had many young people and others who've tried it, and the look on their faces when they videotape it and share it, their young ones are digging up carrots that are bright, fresh, and they sweeten up. A lot of things will sweeten with that cold. Beets and parsnips. Oh, parsnips are so sweet once they've had that cold. Um, and many of our foods are cold crops. So right now, what I'd be doing Um, because I usually seed my garden at the end of the last after the last hard frost, usually November. I'll seed the garden and cover with leaves, and in the spring everything just comes up on its own. And I'm eating my spinach 6 weeks before anyone's even putting theirs in the ground, and which then I can do another set of set of plantings, and then I do another set in July, and then even in August I'll plant bush bean. By the end of October, I got beautiful sweet beans, and not the pole bean though, because those ones do take longer, but the bush bean definitely does great that way. And so with that method, that's called the moon cycle method. And going by moon cycle is not witchcraft like some people used to think. It actually was practical. And that's why even now and in the past, planting along the side of rivers was important because they knew the moisture underneath was there. And as we know now, the moon affects the tides, not just the tides, but even the moisture in our soil. It rises and falls with that moon. And that moon is very powerful in its light. So this was about some seeds who were worried. So like, we're worried, we see that moon and then all of a sudden she's gone. Where did she go? And then she comes back. Ah, yeah, older ones, the trees were like, well, she comes and goes because if she was here all the time and shining all the time, we'd never get sleep. We need to have some rest. And this is our time to rest, is during that time when she's not as bright. Ah, she said, and for you seeds, because she affects the water in the soil, you'll sprout during that time that you're supposed to. Because if you seed them all at once, they'll still come up when they're supposed to. So how I remember it is leaf bean root rest. So leafy greens or things that produce seeds outside of a pot is during the new moon. That's how I remember it. It's new, fresh, leafy, right? The week after, I call it bean week because that's when you plant seeds that are where they're produced inside a pod. So you like your squashes and beans and such. The week after is root week, and that's when the full moon is out. And that's when we would do root vegetables, such as, your carrots and beets and stuff like that. And then the week after, I call it rest week because that's when I go through my garden and I do my what they call coppicing or pinching of my plants. That's when I look for any issues as well as a little rest. And it makes sense that after the moon goes away, that water is going down in soil. So all those root vegetable seeds that you planted have sprouted and now are chasing that water. So now they're going to get longer and they're going to do better. And I've tested it and it's worked every time. And when I tried to be stubborn and do it my own way, well, the seeds would end up germinating when they were darn well ready. So I figured, why try and do everything at once? The moon gives us a chance to do a cycle so that way we're not stressed. So when it comes time to seed those things during that week, that's all I seed. And then it just works for me, and science has now proven it has. Even online, now you can type in moon cycle planting and everyone's got a list and saying when to plant and at the cycle of the moon. And it's true that when you trim plants before the full moon, they will recover quicker because they're getting more light at night. Whereas if you cut it after the full moon, when there's less light, they're going to come back a little slower. So you can control how quick something recovers from trimming, or how, if you want to kind of like grass, for people who have lawns, I dislike it. If you don't want it to come back as fast, do it after a full moon. And that way it'll be slower to come back, to grow back, right? So it's an actual science that is now being shared. So going by that moon cycle, very important. The same with disturbing the soil. They've now found that there's what they call mycelium, just like a fungus that grows from that leaf material that's being brought down from with the worms and the other insects, is that it grows, plants live off that. Trees live off of mycelium. It's not just in Minecraft. I teach my grandkids, they're like, mycelium, we know what that is. That's in Minecraft. It's like, well, actually, that's a reality of life. Everything relies upon mycelium to grow. So if we disturb the soil, we end up exposing that mycelium to the sunlight, which then depletes the soil. And so by having a no-dig method, it's very easy. I just poke a hole in the ground, put the seed in, and things come up around it. And I've never gone back to doing seeds in the house or doing, everything at once. We're all busy, right? So having it each set of plants for its own week has made it far easier to manage growing. I live in an apartment, but because I grow at Spirit Park, we have 10 plots that we have just for the community. The other 20 are for private, but the front 10 we plant for the community, and we always ask them, what would you like? We'll plant what you're going to use, right? We're not going to plant stuff what we're going to insist on. What are you going to be able to use that you don't have to cook sometimes, that you can just walk by and eat? And it's always the beans. So we plant the yellow bean and the green bean and the purple ones. Purple ones no one steals because they're waiting for them to turn a different color. So so it works that way. And zucchini, we've never had one get beyond this. Every time I check them, I can tell people have been picking. And so we plant those so that way, anyone walking through can make use of. And they do. Once they know, we put signs up saying, this plot's for you, and enjoy the fruit, not the root. so, so that way they can understand to just to pick when it comes to our bushes and that. And so we're able to feed, some people. We don't always keep track because that's not what it's about. It's about giving back and understanding that there's people in need and they can't always get from a soup kitchen or other places. And so we plant for them. And last year the kids wanted asparagus. And I was like, asparagus? Really? And they're like, yep. So we got a bunch of asparagus plants in one plot that's just asparagus. And so it's going to take a little while for them to start producing, but what matters is that we know it's going to get eaten. We know the kids are looking forward from Art City are looking forward to coming in and having a taste of them. And then we have a couple plots. We have mostly herbs, and we have the lovage that comes back every year, and we have other herbs of our sage and dill and a few other things. And we also plant flowers in between because that's important to bring in your pollinators. Because in that leaf material that you put down, it's not just the worms that come up and eat, but a lot of your beneficial insects have made their homes in those curled leaf material, such as leafcutter bees. Our native bees don't hive. They either live in the ground when they overwinter, either overwinter in the ground or they lay their eggs in the stems of plants. So we don't clear the land at the end of the season. We leave it up. Nature itself will break it down. And I know it's hard sometimes not to go out there and start digging, but we wait until we see the volcanoes. It was a volcano. And I said, yeah, you ever notice in the springtime, you see these little mounds of soil? Well, that means that the native bees have emerged. So once they've emerged, then we plant. Then we can clear some stuff because then we know that native bee has been able to come out and meet up with the males and have more babies and all that and pollinate, right? And it turns out there's over 800 varieties of native bees just in Manitoba alone, let alone in North America. So we have many kinds. You see really tiny ones. And when it comes to the flowers of beets, if you ever let a beet go a second year, it will turn totally different and it'll become like a bush, and the most wonderful scent of flower at about 7 o'clock at night. And you'll see these little tiny bees, and they're just so tiny, but they're all over that thing. And because not every flower can handle a big bee. So knowing that, for each flower, there's a certain bee that will be able to pollinate it. That's why when they took tomatoes over to Europe, they didn't have the special bee that did tomatoes. And so they were finding that a lot of the tomatoes over there are no longer able to be as pollinated. So a lot of times they have to hand pollinate now because the flowers have mutated. Now the flowers are not opening. So our native bees, though, they can get in there, and watching them, to me, it's a beautiful sight. I'm up early in the morning, usually 5:30, and my eyes wake up, and that's it. And so when I used to tell people, meet me at the garden in 6, they thought 6 at night. It's like, no, 6 in the morning. That's when things are happening. And one morning I was out there and one of the gladiola flowers opened up. And I watched as it opened up to the warmth of the sun and saw the little bee inside there. He's sleeping. And to watch it groom itself and get ready for the day to fly off and do its pollinating was, to me, one of the most wonderful things in the world. To watch nature as it awakens, and to know that, a lot of what I'm doing is helping that and helping it progress and give back to the land. So even my bones that from my meat, after I make my bone broth with it, usually there's not much left except the calcium. And then I put that right back into the soil. And that helps my plants as well, because why buy bone meal in the store? That's from a rendering plant. My bones from my chicken wings and my bison bones and any of my bones and even the blood from the meat. When I open up the package and I drain the blood out into a cup in the freezer, and then springtime I use that. People say, why would you do that? And I said, well, people buy blood meal in the store. That's all it is dried blood from an animal. And that's why Native people, when they would hunt, they would gather the blood, and that would be spread on the land. And there again, blood meal has iron in it, and many of our plants need iron. So if you want your raspberries to look beautiful and healthy, toss them some bones. I did that one year with some raspberries. That there was only like 3 stalks. So I had some beaver head from a trapper and put them around it. Well, in no time at all, I had so many raspberries that we had plants to share. And the plants themselves will tell you when they're deficient from that blood meal. The leaves become yellower. They're not as strong. They'll give veininess. And that's when it tells me that it's got less of the iron in it. Because raspberries are a woman's medicine. And they would pick the leaf in the springtime because it has a lot of iron in it. So picking the leaf and using it a week before their menses would make them less anemic and also replenish the iron that they lose from their menses. And then their menses blood would be put back to the soil. And so it was reciprocal. And by picking that first leaf, now where the flower is going to come out, the bees can find that flower, where the first leaf usually hides it. That's why when I was a kid, we had to go and look underneath the leaves to find the raspberries. But if you pick those first leaves, then easier to find them beautiful raspberries. And raspberries come in so many different colors. We had some at the garden this past year, white ones and yellow ones. And people are like, hey, they're not turning red yet. Well, no, they're not red. They're not the red variety. There's many different colors of raspberries and carrots and potatoes and such. And it opens people's eyes to the variety, just like we have of people, and the diversity that we need in the garden, just like we have the diversity of people and the things. Not every one of us can be a bean planter, because believe me, my daughter can't grow a bean, but boy, can she count. She's an accountant. So She can count the beans. She can find a penny anywhere, but get her to grow a plant? No, that's what I do. Just like we have people who make baskets to carry the beans. We have others who process the beans. So we can't all do everything. And don't try and make yourself do it. That's why as a community it's so important that everyone find their gift and work together so that way we can find out if we're a basket maker or a bean grower or a counter and be able to then give back to community. And that's part of what I love sharing with the young ones. And then I hear them 5 years later and they're sharing one of my stories of how the seed got over the mountain. They're like, I'm shocked. I'm going, you remember that story? He goes, oh yeah, I remember it. Even though I told it to him when he was in kindergarten. Right? So it's an honor to be able to share these stories. And there's like I said, there's so many. I have 14 of my own and that I share. But each of them have to do with our plants and such. And right now we're in the squirrely time. I said, what's squirrely time? Well, it's an example of when the young one was getting their spirit animal. He was excited. He was like, oh, I'm going to get the bear or the eagle or, maybe even the wolf because I'm like the wolf bone, you know. So when he went to the ceremony, the elders gave him squirrel. He was so disappointed. He said, squirrel? That little tree rodent thingy? Ugh, I'm not happy at all with that. But he didn't say anything because he knew it wasn't impolite to say that to the elders. But when he went home, he said, cook 'em. They gave me squirrel and I don't want to be squirrel. I wanted one of the other ones. She goes, well, elders would not have given you that if you didn't earn that. He goes, what do you mean earn it? How can you earn being a squirrel? They chitter and chatter all the time. They're running all over the place. They're just like, and they're always hoarding food and putting things away. She goes, who likes to talk a lot? Oh, maybe I do like to talk a lot. And who likes to warn people when danger is coming? Yeah, I guess squirrel does that, and I guess I do too. And then she goes, and who likes to eat a lot? Likes to put things in their pocket when there's a little extra? Goes, yeah, I guess I do that too. Then did you notice when you're up in the trees? Because you do like to climb them trees, don't you? Because yeah, I guess I do. I love looking out and seeing what's out there. That way I can see things far away. You can see when the runners are coming to bring the news from the others and such. So, yeah, I do like that. And when you're up in the trees, what do you find? Because sometimes I find food up on the branches. How did it get there? Squirrel. That's right. Squirrel puts the food along the branches, and then once it's dry, he stores it. Yep. And just like squirrel, you love your food and you like to store it away too. And from that, we learned from squirrel how to dry our food and then store it. And storing it in the ground in our granaries in the ground, it keeps the food safe from animals and other things. Because well, I guess squirrel's not so bad. I said, and how do you think we know when maple syrup's coming? He thought for a minute. He goes, that's when squirrel's hanging upside down on the trees, aren't you? Yep. So when you see in the springtime squirrels hanging upside down on the branches, he's nibbling on them branches. He's checking for the sap. So when he starts looking at the sap on the trees, that's when you know when to tap the maple. Because I always wondered how you guys knew. Because it's usually still winter out, snow on the ground, and you're out there gathering the syrup. Yes, because we watch the squirrel. So squirrel's important to our community, just as you are important too. He goes, you know what? It's not so bad being a squirrel. So I'm going to skitter off now. So right now is the squirrel time. If you notice, they're out there. They're when they come out of their temperature, that's when we know the temperature is changing. And when they're checking them branches, they don't just check maple. They check apple trees even. I've seen it in my daughter's apple tree. I'll look outside and watch as he's hanging upside down on a branch. And he's just nibbling away and checking for that sap. So many trees give us sap. Birch does, and boxwood even, and so many plants give us medicine in that sense of the sap, because they've science has analyzed the sap of the tree and found that before it gets boiled down into syrup, it has a lot of what they call antioxidants in it. And that's why when you have that fresh sap, before it's boiled down, it gives you the antioxidants in your body and you get some energy. So I told a friend of mine, once you see the squirrel doing that, you'll see them herd. Those herd, oh yeah, they're checking, they're competing for territory. And they'll run as a whole group. Yeah, you're bullshitting me. Another one of them, their lies. And he took his cat out for a walk, went around the corner of a dumpster, and about 20 squirrels went running by him. His poor cat got so scared he tried to take off, but he's on a leash, and he's like, Audrey was right. They do run like a herd. So they're going a little squirrely at that time because they're getting that energy from the sap, right? And that's when they're testing each other for territory and for partnering up. And so, because that's why if you kill one squirrel, there's another squirrel just going to take its place. So thinking you can kill all the squirrels, it's just not going to happen. So might as well put stuff out for them. In fact, that Spirit Park, for years, we had a plum tree and it never got a plum. So we thought, yeah, turns out one young man was there early in the morning. He got a video of that squirrel snagging every one of them plums. So always plant a little extra for them. If you plant a little extra for them, a little further away from your main crop, you'll have a little bit more. Also, a little bit of barriers. They don't like chicken wire. So when we had a cherry tree there too. We would see the cherries starting to form, and then all of a sudden they're gone. So figured, well, it didn't get usually in the winter time, and at this time is when I trim all my trees, because you want to trim them when they're dormant before the sap starts running. Otherwise they bleed out. And you trim them now and keep them short. So at the park, we show the Saskatoons that I trimmed, cut off the leaders, and other ones we didn't. And the ones that we trimmed, they're nice and short, and they get a lot more berries, a lot fuller berries, easier to pick. You're not pulling down a tree and accidentally snapping it, and a lot easier. So that's how we manage the forest, by trimming the plants so that way they come down low. And there again, trimming at the right time is important. So I figured, okay, we got to figure out how to keep cherries for the kids here. And so what we did, we put some planters around the base of the cherry tree, and we covered them with chicken wire. We knew by watching, as soon as he jumped on that chicken wire, he jumped right off. He was like, don't like that. And we put some sticks in there too, sticking up, so that way he wasn't going to feel free enough to jump on that. And for the first time, we had cherries. So it was a good way to deter them and to steer them elsewhere. And so a lot of times when I'm in the garden, I'll take some of my household waste or other things, and I'll leave it out in the garden for them. Especially in the springtime, once the bees have emerged, and sometimes there's no flowers. They need nectar. So I'll have some fruit juice, which I save. And because I dehydrate all my fruit, I can powder it and then just add a bit of water. And I put it in little saucers out in the garden, and you'll see butterflies, and they'll come, and bees, and they'll come to feed off of that. One lady, she goes, that's freaky. She said, I went by your plot, and there's just like all kinds of insects all over there. And I said, that's what I want. I want to attract my pollinators. I want them to be able to lay their eggs in the leaf material. That is part of that cycle of growing, right? And so giving back to them a bit of juice, it's not going to hurt me none. you know. So I call it my jam without a jar, which is my fruit roll-ups. I can just rip a piece off, put it in a little bit of water, wait 15 minutes, mash it up, and I got jam. Add a little bit more, and then it's more of a nectar that the insects can feed from. So giving back is important, not just to the people, but to nature in itself, because it's a bonus. Believe me, it's a bonus when you have extra bees that are pollinating, and even our beetles, they move soil and they clean soil. Now science has been able to prove all the things that we said were true. I'll keep yakking, so you got to stop me sometimes. So it's 10 after. Have we any questions? I know I filled your head with so much info right now. You're probably going, what can I ask? Yeah.
I have one more question. I want to grow corn in the back of my yard and it's all grass. Can I just put a hole in the ground and put a kernel and corn will grow?
Actually, if you got grass there,
Yes.
yeah. What I would do is I would put down a layer. An easy way to do is cardboard. Put down a layer of cardboard. It'll smother off the grass, because the grass has a chemical in it that stops other seeds from germinating. Right. So smother it off first, and it doesn't take long for that to happen. And I've planted corn in June and still managed to get a crop. The only problem is squirrels. Squirrels just love that corn before it even gets to going. So they don't like prickly things. So if you can find a way to have something prickly around the stem, or it not being too close to a fence, then that'll help you to be able to gather corn. And that's why even at the park, people say, why don't you grow corn? I say, are you kidding? And squirrels will nail it every time. So go to the farmer who's growing corn. A lot easier that way. But you can. And I've shown, I've got red corn and blue corn and purple corn and pink corn. And, I love popcorn from it. But the hard corn is something that when our people would cook it with wood ash, and it breaks down the outer part of the kernel of the corn, and then it turns it into calcium, 90% calcium. So that's why we didn't need to have milk. And that's why many Indigenous people are lactose intolerant. I know I am. But I get my calcium from the Maseka flour, which you can find at Superstore now. And it's traditionally made corn flour where this hard corn that's been boiled in wood ash, which is basically lye, and then strained and boiled again, and then dried and ground up. And best tortilla and best bread you'll have is from that kind of corn. And yeah, so finding a way to protect it is important, but also to remember that if tobacco is nearby, you'll get a fungus on corn. Europeans call it smut, but actually it's like truffles. It's a fungus that grows on it that is so delicious. I know of a farmer that we used to go out and help with the Good Food Club, and he was like, every time I grow corn, I can't seem to get away from that smut. He said, I tried everything. So I took a walk on his land, and at the hill, top of the hill, there was wild tobacco. He didn't know that. And every year that wild tobacco, the pollen and stuff would flow right down over the corn, and his corn would get inoculated with that fungus. He goes, now that I'm retired, I find out. So, but his son grows a few stalks for me because he knows I love it. And it's like a black, it's almost grayish, but it's called Huta cloche. And it's still used in South America and in the southern states as I like to cut it up and fry it and put it on my tacos. Very nutritious though. So it's one of the good mushrooms. So when someone says they got smut and I'm knocking on their door, saying, yeah, I love some of that. So sometimes when we think something's bad, it's actually could be very good. But smother out that grass first. And cardboard's an easy way because cardboard breaks down and the worms and insects will help break it down too. Right. And then you just cut a hole where once that you can lift up that cardboard and you can see once the grass is dead, you can make a little hole and then put your seed in there. Or make a hole and just put a little pile of fresh compost there and put the seed in. But do remember, having beans around that corn is going to help the soil because the corn is going to really take a lot of nitrogen and such from the soil. The beans are there to help keep the nitrogen in the soil for the corn. But you have to make sure the sisters are compatible. I had a friend one time put in a type of flint corn, which is a Manitoba corn, which is very short because we have a lot of wind here. If it's too tall, wind will knock her down. So Manitoba flint corn is very short. But she put pole beans next to it. Well, in no time at all, that pole bean just took over that pole. You couldn't even see that poor little corn plant, right? I said, so you have to have the short bean with that, right? So that's why the sisters are important. They can either help each other or they can change each other, making into different medicines. So you don't want all the sisters in the same spot because they can change each other, but they can also help each other to a certain point, right? So that's why companion planting, you can type that in and you can find the whole list of all the companion planting because in Morden, is where they had the agricultural testing facility and they were testing that story of the sisters. And they found like, well, darn it, they were right. You know, onions and beans don't like to be together. The beans will grow, but they won't produce because the strength and the scent of the onions will affect the beans. And beans don't like cilantro either. So I'm not the only one that don't like cilantro.
There was a question, Audrey, about compost. Talked a lot about like mulching and leaves, but what are some of the other ways that you either make compost or feed your soil?
Well, the mulching does a lot of it. Also, whenever we harvest something or we do what some people call weeding, we don't weed, we just cut it and let it fall down. That green material that you cut, instead of pulling it out, because that disturbs mycelium, we just go along with scissors and we cut it and let it fall down, and that's our green manure and green mulch. But also, I've shared with others too, if you're able to, if you're making a raised bed, as many are liking to do raised beds. Raised beds do take away, in a sense, the ability for worms to come up as well during the spring to mulch. But you can find another way. I've seen it done, and I know it works because I've done it. My son-in-law insisted on a raised bed, so I told him, I said, okay, but only if I can help. So first, about 8 inches was all branches and what you might consider yard waste. He thought it was crazy. I'm going down the back alley in the spring getting everyone's yard waste. Excuse me. And I lay that in, but then I have a 5-gallon pail. And I poke holes all around it. Got him to drill holes everywhere. He goes, well, what's that for? And I said, that's my compost. He said, how? That's not like your regular compost. And I said, well, no. This is a little easier. So I said, once we put the soil in and that and put it around it, those worms are going to come in and they're going to eat all that stuff that we toss in there. So I just leave it to where the lid's up top. I can take the lid off and just toss what I have in there because I'm not a big family. It's just me. I don't have enough to have one of them big compost piles. We used to have one at Spirit Park, but it attracted so many mice that when we took it apart, there was literally, it looked like a maze on the edges because no one would turn it. It's a lot of work to turn those compost piles. So using the pail method, a little bit easier and a little bit more direct too, because when that vegetables are breaking down, they're leaching that good nutrition back into that soil. And I've done it too, where I've just dug a little trench and just buried whatever household waste I have. In fact, I have to bug people for some because I dehydrate all my food, so I don't have to prep anymore. You know, I did 40 pounds of carrots 7 years ago, and I'm not even halfway through them. I only eat fresh during the season, and during winter I eat all from my dried stock. So I have to actually bug people for their compost. It's like, can you drop some of your stuff off? They're like, what do you mean you use carrot tops? And I said, oh yeah, it makes a great pesto. Well, why throw out carrot tops? Yeah, make it into a great pesto. You can dry it and make it into a nice seasoning. You know, the what you call those smoothie mixes. I look at it and it's got all the stuff that I have a 5 gallon pail of. Oh, and even at the market, I see people cutting the tops of their beets off and throwing them away, and I'm going, oh, throw them over here. I need some veggie flour. And if you run out of that, well, you know what? Those juicing places that make that juice for everybody, they throw away the pulp. And I'm like, what heck? When I need some, I just knock on their door and say, hey, can I grab a pail of that? And they're always happy to give me a pail. And then I take it home, I dehydrate it, and I got my veggie flour. But I got my nutrition from all that spinach and other things that they juiced up. They helped me out by taking the water out of it, but they left the pulp, which is a good, healthy thing as well. Okay. So there's ways to source. You just got to think outside the box, as my auntie said. Says you eat from a box, you end up in a box. You eat from a can, that's where you get the cancer. So she never ate the westernized food. And since I've switched over, I can't either. I tried a Dorito a while ago and my tongue spit it out. It couldn't handle it. There's too many chemicals on it, and so many things are overly sweet or overly salty. Now I can taste my food. But because my food is so concentrated, I only eat once a day because I tried eating 3 times a day and one time, and by the second day I was so stuffed. I was like, okay, no, let's listen to the body. And because of that, it feels better. I lost 100 pounds. I lost the diabetes, and I'm food secure. Pandemics can come and go. Snowstorms can come and go, and I'm okay. I got my shelf unit. It's full of all my jars with all my dried goods, and I have enough that I can share. So I share when I have extra, and it's a wonderful feeling to be able to share the goodness that creation provides. And that's why sharing with you tonight. Hopefully you'll take some of this knowledge and put it into practice and share it and have fun. To me, it's like mad scientist, when it comes to food. It's like, what can I do with this? Horseradish leaves. Oh my gosh, horseradish leaves as a rub on meat. I cook with sweetgrass. Sweetgrass is like vanilla. So I poach pickerel cheeks in sweetgrass tea. And oh my goodness, it is so delicious. And then I add, from that, I'll add some maple syrup and then put the rest of the cheeks, the fresh ones, into that for a couple of days and then dehydrate it. I got fish candy. It's one way to get kids to eat fish. I did it one time and brought some to the garden. At first, everyone's like, ew, what do you mean fish candy? I said, try a piece first before you say anything. Well, in no time at all, my jar was empty. And then everyone was taking more and more, enjoying that fish. So more than one way to get them veggies and good nutrition into kids. Even zucchini, those big ones, I like it when people bring me big honkers because I cut them into pieces and then I soak it in fruit juice of my own juice from my own fruit. Or you can just buy fruit juice from the store, let it absorb that and then dehydrate it. You got the best gummy bears. And people are like, how long do they last? I said, like I said, as long as my hand's not in the jar, because they go quick. And so I've known of some young parents who've done that, and boy, them kids eat them up. They are naturally sweet from the sugar from the fruit, so they don't have to add sugar. But then they're getting that nutrition of the zucchini in them as well. So lots of fun with it.
Yeah, I have a question. Get closer. Yeah, I have a question. Okay, so in the winter, when you have your root vegetables and you're saving them like in the garden, how do you keep the mice out of there?
I really don't have a problem with mice.
No problem, okay.
Because because I'm in the city as well. We did have a problem for a while with mice, but then a lot of the hawks were coming around for the mice. So allowing the hawks and that get to them, it helps, right? And also with that leaf material, I've never really had a problem with mice getting munching on them. Have you had a problem with mice eating your root vegetables?
But one time I tried, but I did use straw for my mulch.
Ah,
Maybe that's why.
yeah,
Okay. And the other
yeah,
question, like,
straw,
you're saying that.
yeah, straw doesn't break down as well.
Okay,
So because it doesn't break down as well, when leaf material breaks down, it creates like a mat. And because it has that fungus in it, the mice don't like that.
wow.
But if there's straw, there's air in between that straw, and they can run right through there.
Okay. And the other question was, you were saying like, all these seeds that are coming up from the previous fall. Now, when you get the frost that takes all that out, what do you do? Like, or is that not a problem?
That's not a problem because the seeds only come up when they're ready.
Okay,
You know, nature seems to know when we have our 2 springs. And then what I do is I seed again, because usually I'm eating those things myself.
okay.
I
Okay,
harvest it myself the first flush, and then during that next moon cycle, I seed again. I've seeded zucchinis in middle of July and ended up with a plant that looked the same as the one that was done in May. So thinking that we can only seed once a year, no, you can seed throughout the whole time. And cold stratification is what many of our naturalized seeds need. And let's say you didn't get to put them in the garden last fall. Well, you know what? Use an ice cube tray, I'm sorry, ice cube tray. Put a bit of water in it, let it freeze, and then put those seeds, and then top it off with some more water, freeze it, and then go outside and toss them where you want. Push them down in the ground, cover it over with whatever materials around. They'll all sprout because they need that cold stratification in order to break open that seed coat. So you're providing them with that artificial aspect of the freeze thaw by doing it in the ice cube tray. Just kind of remember to label your trays because I forgot one year and I just had things that were green. So it was like, okay, because the lady says, well, what are they? And I said, oh, no, they're just all green. So we'll have to wait for a while until the secondary and third leaves come out to know what they were. But you can do that with all these seeds. I've done it with everything. And I've even done it with potatoes, where I've just shoved them in the ground in the fall after last hard frost, covered them over with leaf material, and they've come up in the spring right on time. You know, and so I only share things that I've actually done myself. And because I've done it myself, I know it works. It's life, it saves so much of your time and your back work because you're not having to dig anymore. You're not having to make the big rows. You know, for a while before I had my cataracts taken care of, I had a cane. So at the tip of the cane, I put a little spike, or I use the deer antler. That's why deer antlers, when you look at them, they're spaced just perfect. Poke them in the ground and then toss the seed in, done. You know I look strange in the garden sometimes because I got these antlers on my hips, but they fit perfectly, and they fit perfectly in the hand. So I don't have to use the hand shovels. I just use a deer antler. I've lost them a few times in the garden though. That's okay. That's why the deer lose them every year. So that way we got an extra bounty of bones to use. And when the deer antler breaks down enough, it turns into that bone meal, which our land needs. Right? So many uses for that. That's what makes it a lot of fun, is experimenting, think outside the box. So use the ice cube method. You can also use, there's even a Facebook group called Winter Sowing. And they have like milk jugs and they put some soil in there, wet it down, poke holes in the bottom, and they put their seeds in, leave the top off, and then they just put them outside for the 6 weeks. And they go and check on them and everything's sprouted up. And then they can just, there's none of this hardying off and worrying on whether or not they can handle the season. Just lift them out, place them where you want. I like the ice cube method a little better, because then, you don't have, like, sometimes some things are really small seeds and you end up with a whole bucket full. So with an ice cube tray, it's like, okay, 2, 3, 2, 3. And then you can put them space them out where you want them. So like for carrot seeds, you're naturally grown carrot seeds. And when I say naturally grown, is because when you start producing your own seed, you need to stratify them. When you buy from a package in the store, the manufacturer already stratified them. They usually run them through sand, and that puts a nick in the coat. And that's why they start off for you, right? But if they don't have that nick in the coat, then they need that in order to open up, right? So I've always saved my own seeds. I allow my carrots to go for the second year. They'll give me seeds, same with beets. And then I cold stratify them, so that way, which just means planting after last hard frost. And they'll stratify from that cold. All seeds need that. That's why the seed banks all store seeds at -23°C. That's what keeps them dormant until they're ready to be given out to plant, and then they're already cold stratified.
So I have a question, Audrey. Okay, so you were talking about like for like to have a better crop, to use the bone meal and the meat blood. So in the springtime, how does that work?
Usually I watch for the plants to let me know.
Okay.
And how we then, in a way, I know some people say, well, that's weird. What do you mean plants are talking to you? Well, their leaf will let me know. So if the leaf is nice dark green and looking healthy, then I know it's okay. But if my raspberries are coming out and the leaf is all veiny and faded, that means it's lacking in that mineral. That's why having chamomile in the garden is important, because if she turns red when she emerges and she's not real green, that's a lack of phosphorus, right? And so that's where eggshell and things that have banana peel and that have phosphorus are good to put onto your, to make a water from it. And for rooting, to make it easier to root, when things are having a hard time with that, willow. You go and get willow from the river, cut it into pieces. You can make a tea from it, let it sit for a few days, and that water will turn red, and then water your things with that. That's a rooting hormone. That's what they sell in the store in the little container. It's powdered willow. So why go out and pay for it? Nature already provides it, right?
So do you have to dehydrate the bones before you use them and just scatter them on top of the soil, or?
No, I push them in the ground, but also once I make my bone broth, which I let my bones sit in the water in the slow cooker for a good 24 hours, getting all that good stuff, minerals and stuff out of the bone for my own self, or bone broth, which I then dehydrate and have my own bouillon from that. But usually they are almost crumbly, right? So then I put them in my Vitamix, which that sucker, I tested it because my daughter said, this thing will chop up anything. I said, let me see. And boy, I powdered them up in no time. But you don't always, if you don't have a Vitamix or one of them old blenders for the glass ones that had the super duper motors, like I said, just shove them in the ground. Okay, and they'll break down in the soil there. Rabbits, I like to put them out, some on top of the land. Rabbits will chew on them bones. They need that calcium too. And people thought I was crazy until they saw it. And then they're like, oh, she was right. Rabbits do eat bones and meat and sinew and stuff. So they're not always eating lettuce. Believe me. Yep. So that's what I do with by watching my plants, and also if I'm restarting or just starting a new piece of land, I will fortify with that stuff anyway, because it's usually depleted of it, you know. So just keeping that cycle going. And also, you got a little frustration someday. You got a bunch of them chicken bones. They're already dried out. Take them outside in a gutty sack and just whack the heck out of them. Believe me, take out that frustration. I never had to give my daughter a spanking, but she knew when I was ticked off. I'd be smashing something up. It's like, yeah, get that frustration out and then you're okay, right? But at least it's taking it out on the bones, not on someone else's bones. And yeah, it works. And if you don't have bones, hit up every butcher around has got bones, right? And they'll slice them up to whatever size you want. Just don't say you're going to make bone broth. I got this trick. If you tell them you want bones for your dog, a lot of times you'll get them free. So if that doesn't work and then you have to pay for it, well, that's okay. I mean, at least you're getting something out of it. You'll get good bone broth from it, but then also you have something to feed your land. So to me, it's worth it. I asked one time a guy who went out, and I asked him if they use their moose bones. He goes, oh no, we don't use them. I said, well, can you bring me some? Oh my goodness. He, he just brought the front end of the moose that had bones like this. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay, Audrey, gotta be careful what you ask for. And so I took it outside though, a good old hammer, and you put it where the cement, where the step, and give them a good whack, and then broke them up. Then I put them in the slow cooker and cooked to get the marrow out and the nutrition out of the bone. And then, but I also shared those bones with other elders in the community and seniors who knew about bone broth. And they were so thankful to get some bones to make their own bone broth, because it's really healthy for your body. A lot of minerals and vitamins in that bone broth. And then, yeah, by the time I cooked it down, some people do their bone broth for 12 hours. I do 24, at least 18, right? And then once I scoop them out, literally they're falling apart most times anyway, so. Oh, I noticed a hand up.
Yeah, me, Sandy, you don't roast your bones first, eh? I've heard some people roast them, like bake them and then they put them in the slow cooker. That's
I missed that.
She just asked, do you roast your bones first? Like, it's a flavor thing that a lot of people do before you put them in the slow cooker.
Oh, sometimes people do, but
it's not necessary, right?
I find there's not overly a real difference. I think it's more because I do mine for 18 hours to 24, I get that dark brown color anyway, right? So that's usually what happens when you roast the bone, is it just gives that darker color to the fat and to whatever bits are left on the bone. But no, I not that I'm lazy. I just I like to be efficient. Let the slow cooker do its thing. I got a big one. I got this one. I got little ones. And I don't even use the stove and the oven anymore. I use all my slow cookers. I can even do bread in the slow cooker. So, or cake or whatever I want. So once you switch over to that, I can put that in and then go for a nap or go out and do stuff, come back and it's done. Never burns.
Thank
Cause I
you.
forgot, I've forgotten that once or twice and I go, oh shoot, I forgot to turn off the off the slow cooker, and I go back and look and it's even tastier and more flavorful from sitting a little bit longer, so.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Audrey. We're just so grateful to have you, and we can't wait for next month on April 17th. We'll see you then.
We'll see you then, and like I said, get to tossing some ice cubes and stratify them seeds and think outside the box, or as I say, outside the plot.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you guys next month. And I've got a few more stories that we'll tell about. Well, we'll leave it for then. Okay.
Thank
Good night,
you. Oh, good night.
and go out and enjoy the moon tonight. If
Yeah.
there's not
Yes.
much, if there's not too much cloud cover, won't be till midnight. Around midnight, a little after midnight, is when the blood moon will be able to be seen in its
Mhm.
fullness. So enjoy.
Thanks, Audrey.
Bye bye.
Bye.